I've made a couple of videos in the last few days about how parenting in 2025 is a radical act if you are doing it well. And folks asked me if I would make more videos on parenting. I have 4 kids. They are 22, 20, almost 17, and 13. We are unschoolers. We are non-authoritarian parents, and we don't believe in punishment. And I don't believe in the concept of obedience at all. So I was just asking my 22-year-old, she's working on her German final. I was asking her, like, Ruth, what should I talk about? Like, what kinds of parenting do you want me to talk about? She said, oh, why don't you talk to folks about how we don't have a television and how that has shaped the way that we think and the way we spend our time. And I was like, okay, that's a good idea. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of personal background here. I grew up in a household where we did have TV, but we didn't have cable or anything. And I was allowed to watch 1 hour of television a week. And I could pick, but it had to be from PBS. And when I was really little, I was allowed to watch Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers and sometimes Reading Rainbow. But as I got older, it was pick one show a week. And I usually picked Nature or Nova. Sometimes if they came out on the same week, I could watch both. And I was like, oh, I could watch 2 hours of TV a week. Sometimes my parents would let me watch Wonderworks, or they would let me watch Masterpiece with them so I could watch Poirot. I was a big Poirot fan when I was younger. David Suchet was so good. But for the most part, 1 hour TV a week, it had to be PBS. It was usually Nature. It reminds me of those households where the kids are not allowed to have candy at all. Now, we grew up eating very little sweets, but at the holidays, I was definitely allowed to have sugar. And I remember our neighbors in Tucson, Sarah, Lisa, and Jill, their mom was an aerobics instructor. And I remember at Christmas that I would go over to their house and they'd be so excited because their stocking was full of nuts and oranges. And I was like, mine's full of candy canes and chocolate. What the heck is happening? And so candy and chocolate was this like temptation for them because it was forbidden, right? That's kind of how it was for me growing up with TV. If I was over at my friends' houses where they all had cable and they all had really big TVs, I always wanted to watch a movie. I always wanted to watch a cable show with them. I wanted to watch MTV with them. My husband grew up the opposite. They had like satellite TV and his family was always watching movies and they always had like the TV was just on all the time. And he was a latchkey kid from very early, like kindergarten. His mom had to work at the hair shop. And so he would come home and he would be alone, or he'd be there with his sister, who was just a year older than him. And I think they had kind of unfettered access to a TV. So he and I had very different relationships with TV growing up. And I had a lot of resentment about not being able to watch TV and develop my own ability to regulate how much TV I consumed, having it always feel like this forbidden thing. One of the things I did like about that, though, is that our family had very little advertising come into the home. When you listen to NPR and you watch PBS, like you are not inundated with advertisements like you are if you listen to regular broadcast programs or watch regular broadcast or cable TV. And then this book came out in college called Deadly Persuasion by Jean Kilbourne that really reaffirmed everything I felt about advertising, especially the way that advertising is really toxic toward girls and women. It's a book all about the manipulative marketing of the advertising agencies, how harmful that is for America's children, and in particular for girls and women. A couple of reviews here about the book. This frightening expose reveals how advertisers use what they know about consumers' inner desires and dreams to make sure they develop addictive relationships with their products. Kilbourne exposes the way advertisers take advantage of women's and girls' stifled feelings of rage and loss in order to control them, and they cause gender stereotypes to flourish in advertising. Kilbourne exposes the manipulative marketing strategies and tactics used by tobacco and alcohol industries and others in order to keep Americans hooked on their dangerous products. Actually makes me think of a line. I'm a big Cake fan. So there is this line in one of their songs, Rock and Roll Lifestyle, that goes, excess ain't rebellion, you're drinking what they're selling. And that book, Deadly Persuasion, definitely reminds me of that. So that really shaped our decision to get rid of our television. Very early on, Ruth was less than a year old when we got rid of it. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't watch any programming whatsoever. We have laptops and we had Netflix until recently, and we check out a lot of things from the library. There is the Canopy app where you can stream all kinds of content. We are really big Doctor Who fans. We are also really big Succession fans. So my parents had HBO and we would use their HBO login to watch Succession on our laptop. But in our household, the family room is not centered around the TV, right? So many American households, everything is set up facing a television. It is the focus of the living room or the family room, rather than having the furniture where people are facing each other and you are promoting conversation and you're promoting interaction. We have noticed there's a real difference in our house versus friends and family that do have a TV in the way that the room is set up and where all of the attention is given. I'm a big fan of a two-part documentary that came out in the 1990s, Affluenza and Escape from Affluenza. And they talk about families that are orienting their lives in a way that are not focused around consumerism. And one of the families in that documentary, they kept their TV on a little rolling like bar cart in the closet. And they would wheel it out when they wanted to watch a program and then wheel it and put it back away after. And that made the television inconvenient. It sort of reminds me of the Amish about you don't want your technology to run you, to rule you. Like technology should not be something that is convenient to you. But also it meant that their living room was not oriented around a television. Their living room was set up where people were facing people, where there was room to do craft projects and play games, where the television was not entering into anybody's minds, and there was not the temptation to just have it on in the background running all kinds of advertising that would just be absorbed into your psyche, whether or not you were giving it your full focus or not, right? The subliminal nature of advertising is really insidious. And families that have a TV in their living room, in their family room, are often tempted to just have it on for background noise. And that way, that advertising is still seeping into them and still influencing their choices. So not having that advertising come into our home has meant that our house is kind of a safe space from all of that psychological manipulation of the advertising industry. We are not having products hawked to us inside our own home. And I cannot express enough what that has meant for me as a parent to know that my children didn't have this constant pressure and influence that was creating a sense of dissatisfaction in them, making them feel that they lacked for things, making them feel that they needed to buy something in order to fill a hole that advertising was creating in their lives, right? That is something that I was able to protect them from to a large extent, not perfectly, but I noticed that my kids did not have nearly as much of the like, mommy, I need to buy this, I really need this. They were kind of oblivious to a lot of those influences from our consumer society. I do think the greatest tool you can have for de-influencing yourself and your family from being sucked into consumer culture, from participating in a capitalist society, is to get rid of your TV. And again, I am not anti-technology and I'm not anti-entertainment. I'm really kind of anti-advertising. I'm anti-consumerism. And so for us, it means that we have to actively go seek out that kind of entertainment. And we typically find ways to do it where we are not subjected to advertising before, during, and after. And I asked Ruth what she thought about that, whether she thinks it was a good idea for us to not have a TV or she wished that we did. And she said she felt that I had struck kind of that good balance of I don't make my kids feel that shows are inherently bad or that it's this temptation that they then have not developed their own rhythm with and their own ability to find good balance in how much media they're going to watch, right? If my kids are consuming way too much YouTube or they're on TikTok too long, we have conversations about that. Like, what do you think is a healthy life balance? Do you feel that you are spending too much time on this? How can we cultivate some controls so that you're able to get everything else done in your life, but you're also able to find time to entertain yourself? We try and have those conversations. In particular, she was saying one of the best things about it was that my kids were very much sheltered from a lot of the advertising, and it really kind of created in childhood a different way for them to relate to ad campaigns. They see them as intrusive, right? They see advertising as intrusive instead of something that's just omnipresent. It also helped them create their own ideas about what kind of relationships they want to have with products that are sold to us, how they view the advertisement that does come their way. We try to talk about the psychological aspects of it. We try and talk about the manipulative nature of advertising, how the goal is to separate you from your dollars, or the goal is to actually use you as a product to sell to advertisers. That's what network TV does, right? Like, you are the product being sold to advertisers. And I think it has resulted in my children having a greater sense of contentment and not feeling like they have to buy things in order to feel okay about themselves, or not feeling like the way we derive our pleasure and the thing that we're meant to do is to go shopping. That what fills up our life and gives us meaning and makes us feel good is connecting with other people and engaging in pursuits we find meaningful and worthwhile, not buying stuff. So I wouldn't change it. I am grateful that I made that decision way back when I was 23 years old for us to get rid of our TV. If you have other questions about parenting or things that you want to know how we've done it over the years, I'm happy to talk about it. Since folks requested that this be a series, I would like to talk about the things that you want to hear about. So let me know in the comments.